and threatens the foundation of a democracy. So our freedom is at risk for many reasons, but one is the lack of courage and sense of responsibility of many leaders to do the right thing, even if it's not the right time. It may not be the right time, but still, we have to fight to do the right thing, understanding the consequences.
Well, you know, as I mentioned in some of our earlier discussions, your book kind of comes off. It reminds me of this may date me a bit when I was in college back in the early '80s, and watching and getting stuck on the miniseries the day after, where we had nuclear war taking place on the plains of America, and these small stories clustering around how do you deal with a real disaster. You are proposing something, I think, even more hazardous, because now with the, as you call it, the deindustrialization combined with the globalization, you've clearly outlined China as a major player, and that is a large part of the book's focus. And I was struck by, and I have been historically, but your book really exposes it, China almost racing through the stages that we in the West have taken centuries to get through. They've done it in decades, and it's seemingly almost like they have our playbook, and mistakes and all. They are committing them just as much as we did, but in much shorter order. And this is this gas pedal effect where it's being pushed all the way down. And I think that struck you as well, that China is us, only writ large and writ fast. And I wonder if you can make a point there as to your focus on China and your feelings regarding that scenario.
Certainly, Brian. You've really you've focused the right attention on the issue. We've never seen this in history, where a nation has gone through an industrial revolution and economic growth so quickly and transformed itself in such a short period of time into a giant, into an economic and social and political giant. And as we know, industrial nations, and I mentioned this in the book, have transferred thousands of factories to China in the last 2 decades, 25 years. They've also transferred the ecological problems that go with unfettered production. And the Chinese, in their pursuit of growth, have abandoned their environment to progress. At the same time, the benefits and the costs of all this have been truly extraordinary. And I applaud the Chinese initiative and determination to succeed. As we're speaking, a new China is being born that's growing via tremendous infrastructure, technology, and education. At the same time, China's production for the entire world has reduced jobs across the globe and has led to enormous environmental damage and economic dislocation. When I describe in the book the tremendous influx of immigration, not only into the United States from Latin America, but from Africa and Asia into the developed world in 2020 because of this. Well, one of the reasons is massive unemployment by factories being shut down everywhere. So the Chinese now, with their environmental problems, have blanketed the earth with the difficulties of ecological damage. They can't solve their problems alone. We need to help them. And in the process, we'll help ourselves avoid the calamity that could come about in 2020, 2024, 2030. We don't know exactly when it'll happen. But if we continue on this course, it will. And we know it's a good thing that millions of Chinese work and rise up from poverty, but it's not a good thing when they can no longer breathe their own air or farm their own land or fish in their own lakes or seas. They can't even drink their own water. It's not a good thing for them to pollute the oceans and atmosphere of the planet as they produce for us at the lowest possible cost.
It seems to me, and I had hoped, back in the 70s when, Nixon first went to China and began this process that is, accelerating now, as the Chinese slowly woke up, to their potential influence. I remember even at that young age, I thought, with a pang, I thought, whew, if this giant wakes up, it will shake the world. And I think that I'm almost quoting you from your book here, and it was and it has played out in my later life. It's affected me, those I care about, and all the rest. I had really hoped, even back in the 70s. I thought, okay, here we are. We're facing really cheap labor, and if they industrialize effectively, which we've arranged for that to happen, they will dominate. But my hope was that their workers would stand up and say, all right, just like the original union movements of the early part of the 20th century and late 19th century, that they would seize control, and we would start to see a globalized wage parity. Perhaps that's one way this comes back, because at some point it seems that this cheap labor hunt, eventually you can be looking in the wilds of Antarctica, trying to find penguins that will work cheaper than us. It seems that eventually, I hope, this natural force, if you will, and maybe I have some faith in the natural economic forces out there, that that this kind of globalized wage disparity will eventually evaporate. But it seems to come down to a resistance. It doesn't happen as fast in China because of cultural norms of hard work and sacrifice that can be effectively played on by corporate goals.
It'll take at least a generation before China changes into the mode of protecting labor and having minimum wages along the lines that we're used to, protecting workers' rights and job security and so many other things. Part of the problem, of course, is population. We're talking about almost a billion and a half people. It's an enormous population, and there are workers in every single sector. There are even excess workers in every single sector. So as a result, there's a less of an inclination to strike for workers' rights because of so many people looking for jobs because of their enormous population. But eventually that'll happen. In the meantime, some of the things we described in the book could happen as well, and I think they will. We could have more and more turmoil in China. We could have a revolution, and a revolution would affect each and every one of us. It would be by far beyond anything that's happened to date in history. It would affect every place on earth. And the Chinese government could lose control of its country. There are riots that go on all the time in China, and we mentioned that in the book as well. There are thousands of them every year. And it's because of inequities. It's because of a lack of voice that the Chinese people really have in their own destiny. So something has to change because really the future of our world and the future of humanity is at stake because of China and so many other problems as well that we outline.
Mm-hmm. Well, at the risk of dragging too many other books into our discussion, it just your work just kind of ignites my mind, and has me reviewing things I've read over the course of my life. When I was a young man, I read a short science fiction book called Letter to a Phoenix. And it was basically just excerpts from somebody's diary who, it starts out by explaining, I am the survivor of a nuclear war. I'm mutated. My cells are virtually immortal. I seem to be able to live forever, and I have watched you come and go. Your tides rise and fall, humanity, and I have to say, you are the phoenix. You always rise from the ashes. So I am optimistic for your future. And as it turns out, at the end of the novel, you realize that he's from a nuclear war that happened long before the present age. And honestly stands back and says, well, it's about to happen again, but don't worry, you're a phoenix. It's about to come. But what I found more profound is this the potential of a global collapse, which you are ringing the alarm bell on, to be far more effective.